The 30th of August to the 20th of September 1975 saw the transmission of Terror of the Zygons, written by new writer Robert Banks Stewart and directed by veteran Who director Douglas Camfield, launching Doctor Who's 13th season. The viewing figures for Part 1 were the story's highest at 8.4, but Part 2 saw the lowest figures for the story and season overall with 6.1 million. Robert Holmes was fully settled into his role as script editor for the series and finished work on Season 12, whose stories were initiated by outgoing producer Barry Letts. Holmes was keen to bring on new writers for the series and approached an old acquaintance of his named Robert Banks Stewart. Stewart had begun his writing career in the theatre before moving to television, with credits for The Avengers, Danger Man, The Saint and The Sweeney. He had also been approached to write for Doctor Who during its early years, but nothing really came of it. Being a native of Scotland, Stewart was keen to set his story in his home country and suggested to Holmes that the legendary Loch Ness monster would make an ideal basis for a story, given that there were very few details that existed about the mythical creature. The idea that a creature exists in the Loch has been fantasised for as much as 1500 years. However, the story gained new popularity when, in 1933, a road passing by Loch Ness was constructed, and interest in the myth reaching a global scale by the 1960s. The script was officially commissioned by Holmes to prepare a 6-part story titled Loch Ness in March 1974. For the rest of the year, Stewart began working on his script, but was cut from 6 episodes to 4, and unfamiliar with the style of Doctor Who, Stewart initially wrote the Doctor, Sarah and Harry similar to the protagonists of The Avengers, and had to be guided by Holmes in refining these elements. The original script placed more emphasis on the Scarrison and the Loch, and the initial cliffhanger for episode 2 involved the Doctor being attacked by the monster as he rode across Loch Ness. Holmes, however, felt that the Zygons were more interesting characters and asked for more emphasis on them, given that they could interact with the main cast a lot more easily. During rewrites, Sister White became Sister Lamont, and Claymore Oil was renamed Iberian Oil. In early 1975, the story underwent title changes from The Loch Ness Monster to The Secret of Loch Ness. At the same time, Douglas Camfield returned to direct after a 5-year absence. He had last helmed Inferno but never completed due to suffering a heart murmur in production, but was luckily drawn back to the series due to his fascination with Stewart's story. Throughout 1974, buzz had been building about Jerry and Sylvia Anderson's new science fiction series entitled Space 1999, which was being developed for ITV, with the series set for a September debut. Since 1970, Doctor Who had always debuted in early January, and concern now arose that if Season 13 started 3 months after Space 1999 launched, the viewing figures could dip. In January 1975, it was decided that Season 13 would be brought forward for an autumn start, meaning that the recording block had to start much earlier. To facilitate this, Season 12 was trimmed from 26 episodes to 20. Secret of Loch Ness was scheduled to be the final serial of the 12th recording block and the Season 12 finale, but was held back to start Season 13, but this also eliminated a break between Seasons 12 and 13 for the production team. Meanwhile, producer Philip Hinchcliffe also determined that Harry Sullivan should be written out of Doctor Who at the end of Secret of Loch Ness. The character had been created at a time when it was thought that the 4th Doctor might be played by an elderly actor, who would be unable to participate in action sequences. With the casting of Tom Baker in the lead role, Hinchcliffe felt that Harry was now redundant. Holmes disagreed with the producer, believing that Harry was a valuable and distinctive ingredient of the TARDIS team, but nonetheless had Stewart amend his scripts appropriately, and Hinchcliffe would later admit that Holmes' views had been correct. The exit of Harry Sullivan also removed one more link between the series and the Earthbound unit format, which had propelled it through the early 1970s. Hinchcliffe wanted to set more adventures on alien worlds, and actors Nicholas Courtney and John Levine, who had been contracted for Secrets of Loch Ness to once again play the Brigadier and Benton, became aware that their irregular appearances in Doctor Who would soon cease altogether. Meeting with Hinchcliffe in the BBC bar, Courtney suggested that the Brigadier should be killed off, exiting the series in a blaze of glory. Hinchcliffe turned down the idea, however, feeling that it would be inappropriate for a character who had been so vital to the programme. Location work began filming in West Sussex, as the budget didn't accommodate the cast and crew to travel to Scotland. The first day, in March 17th, the beach scenes were recorded at Climping Beach in Climping, while the TARDIS arrival took place on Ambersham Common in South Ambersham. The Common also stood in for the sequences on Tulloch Moor. The Zygon spaceship landing and the hospital exterior were Hall Aggregates Quarry in Storrington. The 19th of March was spent entirely on the Common, with more material set on the moor and a departure of the TARDIS. On March 20th, the venue shifted to Charlton, with filming occurring at both the Fox Inn and a barn. The day after, Furnace Pond in Crabtree posed as Loch Ness. This should have marked the end of the recording in West Sussex, but poor weather earlier in the week forced the allocation of 2 extra days. March 24th saw a return to Hall Aggregates Quarry for another hospital exterior shot, while the 25th was again spent at Abersham Common, once more pressed into services as Tulloch Moor. The same day, Elizabeth Sladen was contracted for 22 episodes of the 13th recording block. Tom Baker's services had already been secured for all 26 episodes on the 21st. On March 26, footage of Millbank Tower in London was captured for use in the climactic Scarrison sequence. By now, both stop-motion animation and puppetry had been employed to bring the Scarrison to life. Unfortunately, this material proved to be of inferior quality, and Camfield decided to use as little of it as possible. The first studio session then occurred in BBC Television Centre Studio 3. Monday, April 7th involved the taping of episode 1, with the second episode following on Tuesday the 8th. Around this time, Hinchcliffe elected to change the serial's title, as he feared that emphasising the Loch Ness monster was misrepresenting the story's contents. The adventure became The Zygons, and finally to Terror of the Zygons. Recording shifted to a slightly later in the week for the second studio block, which took place in TC4. Part 3 was completed on Tuesday, April the 22nd, along with the lone Fargill Castle scenes from Part 4. The remainder of the last instalment was then taped on Wednesday the 23rd. The completion of Terror of the Zygons brought Doctor Who's 12th production block to a close, although work immediately proceeded on to the next set of episodes for Block 13. This also meant that Ian Marter's time as a regular as a Doctor Who artiste had come to an end. Marter would continue to maintain a connection to Doctor Who, however, after returning for one more appearance as Harry shortly after in The Android Invasion. Marter went on to write several novelisations of Doctor Who stories for Target Books. He also authored an original Harry Sullivan novel, Harry Sullivan's War, for Target's short-lived The Companions of Doctor Who range. He twice made unsuccessful bids to write for the TV series itself, once in 1980 and later with a submission entitled Strange Encounter for Season 23, and with Tom Baker co-wrote the screenplay for an unmade Doctor Who feature film called Doctor Who Meets Scratchman. Marter also continued to act on stage and television, earning credits on programmes such as Bergerac and The Return of Sherlock Holmes. Unfortunately, Ian Marter died of a diabetic condition on October 30th, 1986. The Doctor, Sarah and Harry return to Earth in response to the Brigadier's summons. The unit are investigating a series of attacks on the North Sea oil rigs and have set up a temporary HQ in the Scottish village of Tulloch. The attacks are the work of a huge cyborg, the Scarrison, controlled by a group of aliens called Zygons, whose spaceship lies at the bottom of Loch Ness. The Zygons plan to take over the Earth as a substitute for their own planet, which has been devastated by solar flares. They are using their shape-shifting abilities to take on the identities of locals, whose inert bodies are held aboard their ship. The Doctor releases the Zygon prisoners and causes their ship, which has now emerged from the lock, to self-destruct. Only their leader Broton survives. He has assumed the identity of the Duke of Forgill and travelled to London. They plans to give a show of strength by destroying a World Energy Conference with the Scarrison. When it comes to discussing Terror of the Zygons amongst fans, it is consistently rated high, and I admit I am no exception. The story itself is nothing too special or unique, but it's more or less Doctor Who at a crossroads, as at this point in its history, UNIT was now on its way out, and Terror was more or less the organisation's final hurrah. With the final appearance of the Brigadier for another 8 years, there's a sense of looking to the series past for one last time before heading off to pastures new. However, the simplicity of the story is what makes it so watchable for me. Tom Baker continues to shine in the debut of his second season, and season 12 had established a very different Doctor than his predecessor John Pertwee, and he continues to do so here. While the Doctor does lecture the Brigadier about oil not being an emergency, it feels very similar to how the third Doctor would comment on the futility of minerals. The way the lines are delivered, though, are remarkably different. The third Doctor would usually stand tall and claim his presence with his argument. In comparison, Tom is lying down in Scottish attire, and his body language suggests that he doesn't take this emergency seriously at all. It says to the viewer that because the Doctor has a childish attitude towards oil, then the viewer should as well. As we learn later in the season, the Doctor walks in eternity, so it can be argued that the oil humanity craves is irrelevant to him when there is so much more out there. The fourth Doctor seems to have mellowed out more since his first season. and for the next 2 seasons he will adopt this darker, more brooding persona, but with a childlike sense of adventure that the character inhibited during the Philip Hinchcliffe era. Rather than be sympathetic towards Sarah when they're both running out of oxygen in part 2, he simply tells her to shut up and save her breath, but of course he hypnotises her into not breathing and thinking that she doesn't need it. The Doctor has a plan and you should let him get on with it, but he also shows his heroic and selfless side when he endures pain in order to send a signal to UNIT within the Zygon spaceship. This is the definitive 4th Doctor for me. Elizabeth Sladen a lot of inquisitiveness to Sarah Jane. It does get her into danger with the Zygons, but she is able to learn from her mistakes, such as encountering the fake Harry in episode 2 and not trusting the real one when she meets him again in episode 3. As a journalist, she's able to use intelligence and curiosity to move the story along naturally, without it feeling forced or contrived. It's ironic that this is Harry's departure, when I feel that this is the best material that Ian Marter had during his time on the series, but I also feel it's a culmination of his character growth. The bumbling Doctor from season 12 has now vanished, and he's a consistently reliable and professional. His skills seem to be more useful when he's on Earth. His departure scene is a bit lackluster and not entirely emotional, but I feel it is in line with Harry's character. He gets on with any challenge in front of him, but prefers his skills to be honed in on Earth. However, Ian really shines as the Zygon double, and can be pretty intimidating when he's trying to kill Sarah in the barn. It's such a huge departure from his character, and shows the range that Ian could play as an actor. The Brigadier is also given a fitting hurrah, as the comedic character from Planet of the Spiders and Robot is now gone, and replaced with a more stern authority figure that he was in his earlier years. This could have been due to Campion's direction, as he had previously directed The Invasion, which was UNIT's debut in 1968. I do think the 4th Doctor and the Brigadier work very well together, and it is a shame that they couldn't share any more screen time. Their relationship is different to that of the 3rd Doctor. Here they feel more like equals, where the 3rd Doctor was the Brigadier's superior, but however, the 4th Doctor is clearly annoyed when being summoned by the Brigadier, as he feels he doesn't really owe UNIT much anymore. Courtney plays the Brigadier with a stiff upper lip, and one of my favourite scenes is when he's on the phone to the Prime Minister.
It's for you, sir. The Prime Minister.
Lethbridge Stewart speaking. Oh, absolutely understood, madam. No public announcement.
It's just golden. Not to mention the kilt is absolutely brilliant. The supporting cast are all memorable in their roles. John Woodnutt plays the Duke of Forgill, his copy, and the Zygon leader Broton. Woodnutt performs all 3 roles superbly. He has a coldness that he brings to the Duke's copy, and you could make the argument it's a parody of the pompous authority figures that the 3rd Doctor would typically encounter on Earth. The copy is cold and distant, but the real Duke is very warm and friendly. His standout performance has to be Broton though, giving the character the typical arrogance of a Doctor Who villain, but providing that strong, husky voice that would guarantee nightmares and scurrying behind the sofa.
I am Broton, warlord of the Zygons.
Despite the huge mask, John's eyes pierce through, and the close-ups are extremely effective. Angus Lenny plays Angus, the landlord of the Fox Inn. Angus had previously appeared as Storr in the Ice Warriors, and sadly meets a similar fate when he is killed by one of the Zygons. Angus is your stereotypical Scot, but I think he represents the heart of the village, as technology doesn't mean much to him, and thinks it's better if people simply sit and talk to one another. He is a man of tradition. My favourite moment is when he assures Sergeant Benton that there are no bugs in his inn. Angus also feels that the oil rigs have taken all the servants from his inn, which was reflective of the time of fishermen's jobs being affected by oil rigs. In the northeast of Scotland, they'd give up their jobs as fishermen and have to work on oil rigs to make ends meet. Lilias Walker plays Sister Lamont, who gives a chilling but not entirely subtle performance. It wasn't really a surprise to me when she turned out to be a Zygon copy, given how cold and distant she was with the other characters. Compare this to the Duke, when viewers at the time may have been used to dismissive authority figures. Nevertheless, the scene where she kills a soldier with a rock is genuinely chilling, and who knows, this could have made children be very wary of nurses. The Zygons were designed by talented costume designer James Ackerson, who had previously designed the 4th Doctor's costume and would go on to win 3 Oscars in the 80s and 90s for film. The design for the Zygons is very distinctive and memorable, despite only appearing in one story during the classic era. I still feel that they are very iconic to this day. While their plan isn't anything too special, they want to make the Earth their home and wipe out humanity. I think it's the look and feel that makes them rise above being generic bad guys. The voices are very chilling to listen to and sound pretty terrifying towards the end when Broton attacks the Doctor. I think a lot of what their iconography is down to is the way Camfield films them. We first see their hands operating controls, then we get a close-up of their eyes, and for the cliffhanger we finally see them in full when they surprise and attack Sarah. It's the perfect way to build tension, and once they're on screen they don't disappoint at all. It would be another 38 years before they'd reappear on our screens in the 50th anniversary, and then reappear in the Series 9 two-parter, The Zygon Invasion and Inversion. In my opinion, it was worth the wait, and none of their reappearances diminished them as characters, but even if they did, they'd still be one of Doctor Who's greatest one-off monsters. Being directed by Douglas Camfield, the production is of course to a high standard. The location filming is shot beautifully, particularly the sniper scenes on the beach. We get a beautiful establishing shot of the calm sea. Then we see Munro's body washed on the shore, confirming the Doctor's theory that the sea is calm, but never empty. Close-up on the sniper's trigger are also very chilling, and the fact that Harry gets shot as well really racks up the tension and paces the mystery along superbly. The characters are in danger at just the right moment, so it doesn't feel rushed or action with no purpose. I do find it a shame that Bergen never worked on any more stories beyond Seeds of Doom, but at this point Dudley Simpson was the in-house composer, and many directors were content to use him. This isn't to dismiss Dudley's work at all, but I think it would have been nice to hear more different musical composers during the 1970s. If you're interested in listening to Jeffrey's score, you can find a few tracks on Spotify, or listen to it isolated on the DVD. If I did have criticism of Terror of the Zygons, it would most obviously be the Scarrison. The stop motion just doesn't really hold up anymore in the scenes we do see it. If there's ever a Blu-ray release of Season 13, I'm sure there will be an optional CGI update. Luckily, the full view of the Scarrison isn't used a lot, and a lot of the time we see it from the creature's POV, and don't see it attacking the rigs, but we are fully aware of its power due to its powerful bite marks in the structure, and it still remains a credible threat for our heroes. That's not to say that the rest of the production is a complete letdown. The interior of the Zygon spaceship, designed by Neil Curzon, is very good. It's distinctly alien, but looks uniquely organic. The lighting also really adds to the atmosphere. The green and orange makes you feel like you're deep underwater, though the Zygon controls do remind me of pizzas a little. This was to be Neil Curzon's only story where he worked as a set designer, and the model work by John Horton is also really good. The Zygon ship looks intimidating, as if it was built for conquest, and the effect of it rising from the Loch may look slightly off by today's standards, but I don't think it's anything too distracting, and the explosion at the end is big enough for me. Despite the Scarrison appearance and its simplicity, Terror of the Zygons still holds up over 40 years later. It's a callback to the Pertwee years of alien invasions, but perfectly looks ahead to the future of Doctor Who under Philip Hinchcliffe, with more emphasis on horror, darker tones, and fallen gods, and a new companionship with the Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane only. Unit are very well handled, the music is superb, it's shot like a film, and the monsters are scary and memorable. The Brigadier and Harry are given good send-offs to their characters that feel true, and Tom Baker now feels fully settled. Terror of the Zygons has always ranked highly when it comes to fan and audience polls, and will continue to do so for many years to come.